So Esha Prakritim Sukshmam Daivim Gunamayim Yudhuhu Yadruchayaivopagatam Abhyapadyata Leelaya. As his pastime, that Supreme Personality of Godhead, the greatest of the great, accepted the subtle material energy which is invested with three material modes of nature and which is related with Vishnu. Eshaha Paramatma Yadruchaya Eva Svairataya Eva Swashaktitvad Vagatam Karmabandha Jagat Sriksha Samaya Eva Swashaktitopagatam what? Ugatam Prakritim Mate. Leelaya Abhyapadyata Jivashakti Rupam Viryam Tasyam Adadhana Aikshata Ityartha. So this Supreme Soul, simply by his own will, Svairitaya Eva, indicates that it was purely his own will. He is not caused by anyone. That is the point. It's not that he is pressured by somebody else. So he accepted this Prakriti, who is his own potency. At which time, at the time when he wanted to create this world, which binds the conditioned souls through their karma. So sportively, that means effortlessly, he accepted her. He accepted Prakriti. And he glanced at her. He glanced at her while injecting his prowess in the form of the Jiva Shakti into her. In this verse, the word Gunamayim is very significant. The Yim is okay, Gunamayim. What is Gunamayim? Invested with the three modes of material nature. Let me do one thing. First of all, I'm not able to see. What is this? Just to make it easier. This is a problem. How do I? Okay, I just have to shuttling the thing. Oh, this is going to be a problem. Okay. Okay. In this verse, the word Gunamayim is very significant. Gunamayim, invested with the three modes of material nature, subtle material energy, which is invested with the three material modes of nature. Daivim means the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Daivim means related to the Deva, related to Vishnu. It is related to Vishnu, the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Gunamayim means invested with the three modes of material nature. When the material energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears, this Gunamayim energy acts as a manifestation of the energies of the three modes. It acts as a covering. The energy emanated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead manifests in two ways: as an emanation from the Supreme Lord and as a covering of the Lord's face. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that because the whole world is illusioned by the three modes of material nature, the common conditioned soul being covered by such energy cannot see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The example of a cloud is very nicely given. All of a sudden, there may appear a big cloud in the sky. This cloud is perceived in two ways. To the sun, the cloud is a creation of its energy, but to the ordinary common man in the conditioned state, it is a covering to the eyes. Because of the cloud, the sun cannot be seen. It is not that the sun is actually covered by the cloud. Only the vision of the ordinary being is covered. Similarly, although Maya cannot cover the Supreme Lord who is beyond Maya, the material energy covers the ordinary living entities. Those conditioned souls who are covered are individual living entities. He, from whose energy Maya is created, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, individual living entities means the finite living beings, the Jivatmas. In another place in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto, 7th chapter, it is stated that Vyasadeva, by his spiritual vision, saw the Supreme Lord and the material energy standing behind him. This indicates that material energy cannot cover the Lord, just as darkness cannot cover the sun. Darkness can cover a jurisdiction which is very insignificant in comparison to that of the sun. Darkness can cover a small cave, but not the open sky. Similarly, the covering capacity of the material energy is limited and cannot act on the Supreme Personality of God. It is therefore called Vibhu. As the appearance of a cloud is accepted by the sun, so the appearance of the material energy at a certain interval is accepted by the Lord. Although his material energy is utilized to create the material world, this does not mean that he is covered by that energy. Those who are covered by the material energy are called conditioned souls. The Lord accepts the material energy for his material pastimes in creation, maintenance, and dissolution, but the conditioned soul is covered. He cannot understand that beyond this material energy, that is the Supreme Personality of God, who is the cause of all causes. Just as a less intelligent person cannot understand that beyond the covering of the clouds, there is bright sunshine. 5. गुणैर्विचित्रा सृजतीं स्वरूपाः प्रकृतिं प्रजा विलोक्य मुमुहे सद्य इह ज्ञानगूहया. Divided into varieties by her threefold modes, material nature creates the forms of the living entities, and the living entities, seeing this, are illusioned by the knowledge covering feature of the illusory energy. Tatra jivasya mohamaha. Now he speaks about the delusion experienced by the jiva. Prakritim vilokya saha jivatma iha prakritau sthitaha sadhyaha. प्रकृति संसर्ग समय एव ज्ञान गुहया प्रकृते एव अविद्या आख्य वृत्त्या युक्तः मुमुहे स्वरूपम विसस्मार. When the jivatma looks at prakriti, that means that jivatma who is situated in prakriti immediately becomes bewildered. That means at the very time he comes in contact with prakriti, then he becomes connected with Prakriti, who covers up the knowledge of the Jivatma. That means through her aspect known as avidya, he becomes bewildered. He becomes bewildered means he forgets his own nature, his own form. Sada eva anadi. अनाद्य विद्यया युक्तः अपि जीवः सुषुप्तौ यथा स्वरूपं किञ्चित् उपलभते तथैव सृष्टेः पूर्वं प्रलयेऽपि स्वरूपम् उपलभमानः एव आसीत्. मानः एव और इव. Wait. This is text number 5. उपलभमान एव आसीत्. Okay. Just as in deep sleep, the Jivatma, even though he is connected with avidya from beginningless time and constantly, still he slightly realizes his own nature. See, in deep sleep, there's no connection with the jiva is not overcome by the forces of the subtle body or the gross body, by the influence of the subtle body or gross body. That is known as deep sleep. So at that time, it is well known from the Upanishads, the Paramatma embraces the Jivatma. And therefore, that at that time, there is some experience of the sort of happiness which cannot be attained in the dream state or in the wakeful state. So therefore, he is saying this. Similarly, prior to creation, at the time of dissolution also, the Jivatma experiences its nature. Srishtar, why Srishtar? Srishtarambe, it must be Srishtyarambe. Srishtyarambhe tu tad visasmara ityartah. But at the time of the beginning of the creation, the Jivatma forgets its nature. Idrishim, what is the nature of that Prakriti? Gunaihi sattvadibhir vichitraha prajaha srijantim. She creates various offsprings through through her modes, which means sattva-guna, raja-guna, tamo-guna, tatha shruti. And that's a Shruti statement to this effect. Shvetashvatara Upanishad 4.5. Ajame Gamlovita Shukla Krishnam Bahvim Prajam Janayantim Sarupam Ajohye Ko Vishama No Shete Jahatyena Bhukta Bhogam Ajonya. This is referring to the Jivatma as a male goat and Maya as a female goat. So there is a female goat and the male goat who there is one who associates with her and there's one who rejects her. There are two different ajas and one aja. And the female goat has been described as having various colors: white, black, red. She generates Sarupam. And she also begets offspring, children who are like her. This is a metaphor, of course. So one of them associates with her intimately. Another one, after having previously associated with her, gives her up. So this is a reference to a conditioned soul and a liberated soul. Material energy has the power to cover knowledge, but this covering cannot be applied to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is applicable only to the Prajaha, for those who are born with material bodies. Prajaha, living entities, forms of the living entities. For those who are born with material bodies, the conditioned souls. The different kinds of living entities vary according to the modes of material nature, as explained in Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literature. In Bhagavad Gita 7.12, it is very nicely explained that although the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance are born of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is not subject to them. In other words, the energy emanating from the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot act on him. It acts on the conditioned souls who are covered by the material energy. The Lord is the father of all living entities because he impregnates material energy with the conditioned souls. Therefore, the conditioned souls get bodies created by the material energy, whereas the father of the living entities is aloof from the three modes. It is said in the previous verse that the material energy was accepted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in order that he might exhibit pastimes for the living entities who wanted to enjoy and lord it over the material energy. This world was created through the material energy of the Lord for the so-called enjoyment of such living entities. Why this material world was created for the sufferings of the conditioned souls is a very intricate question. There's a hint in the previous verse in the word Leela Ya as his pastime. as his pastime, which means for the pastimes of the Lord. The Lord wants to rectify the enjoying temperament of the conditioned souls. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that no one is the enjoyer but the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This material energy is therefore created for anyone who pretends to enjoy. An example can be cited here that there is no necessity for the government's creation of a separate police department. But because it is a fact that some of the citizens will not accept the state laws, a department to deal with criminals is necessary. There is no necessity, but at the same time, there is a necessity. Similarly, there was no necessity to create this material world for the sufferings of the conditioned souls, but at the same time, there are certain living entities known as Nityabadha who are eternally conditioned. We say that they have been conditioned from time immemorial because no one can trace out when the living entity, the part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, became rebellious against the supremacy of the Lord. It is a fact that there are two classes of men, those who are obedient to the laws of the Supreme Lord and those who are atheists or agnostics, who do not accept the existence of God and who want to create their own laws. They want to establish that everyone can create his own laws or his own religious path. Without tracing out the beginning of the existence of these two classes, we can take it for granted that some of the living entities revolted against the laws of the Lord. Such entities are called conditioned souls, for they are conditioned by the three modes of material nature. Therefore, the words Gunai Ruchitraha are used here. Gunai, Gunai, by the threefold modes, by her threefold modes. Vichitraha, variegated, divided into varieties. In this material world, there are 8,400,000 species of life. As spirit souls, they are all transcendental to this material world. Why then do they exhibit themselves in different stages of life? The answer is given here. They are under the spell of the three modes of material nature. Because they were created by the material energy, their bodies are made of the material elements. Covered by the material body, the spiritual identity is lost. And therefore, the word mumuhe is used here. Mumuhe, he was illusion. The living entities seeing this are illusion, indicating that they have forgotten their own spiritual identity. This forgetfulness of spiritual identity is present in the jivas or souls who are conditioned, being subject to the covering by the energy of the material nature. Jnana guhaya, by the knowledge covering feature. Illusion, by the knowledge covering feature of the illusory energy, is another word used. Guha means covering. Because the knowledge of the minute conditioned souls is covered, they are exhibited in so many species of life. It is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 7th chapter, the living entities are illusioned by the material energy. In the Vedas also it is stated that the eternal living entities are covered by the different modes and that they are called tricolored. That is what's here. Lohita Shukla Krishna, red, white, and blue. Krishna means blue. Living entities. Red is a representation of the mode of passion, white is a representation of the mode of goodness, and blue is a representation of the mode of ignorance. Of course, this is a dark blue. Krishna is dark blue. These modes of material nature belong to the material energy, and therefore the living entities under these different modes of nature have different kinds of material bodies. Because they are forgetful of their spiritual identities, they think the material bodies to be themselves. Because the conditioned soul means the material body. This is called moha or bewilderment. Mumuhe and moha are related. Mumuhe means was subject to moha, was put into moha. Moha means bewilderment. It is said in the Katha Upanishad that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is never affected by the influence of material nature. Rather, the conditioned souls are the minute, infinitesimal parts and parcel of the Supreme who are affected by the influence of material nature and now appear in different bodies under the material modes. If I remember correctly, the second Aja might be referring to the Supreme Lord himself. Anyway, it comes in Govinda Vashi. It may not refer to the liberate living entity. I just forgot which how it is explained then. Okay. 6. Evam parabhidhyanena kartrutvam prakritih puman karmasu kriyamaneshu gunairatmani manyate. Because of his forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of material energy as his field of activities and thus actuated, he wrongly applies the activities to himself. Okay, question.
So, One person was asking me, like, if I am unable to get convinced by, he was asking, these are his words, that if others are unable to convince me regarding existence of God or the validity of scriptures, that whatever they describe is actually true, is it my fault?
Look, the first point is this. This world is not a world filled with exclusively desirable experiences. So those who are very satisfied to be here, they can just continue to be satisfied to be here. If somebody wants to continue to take drugs while people beat him up, and he's very satisfied about it, what can you do about it? The scriptures are all meant for those who are seeking for a permanent solution to the pangs of material existence. So those who are looking for a solution, for them the scriptures are speaking. Those who don't want a solution, what you can do about it? Let them, it's like people who are sick and who don't want to go to doctor. It's their problem, no? If they're very satisfied to be in this miserable situation, then there's no, let them be satisfied, that's all.
Yes, bro.
Feed the hungry, neglect the non-hungry. That has always been my policy. Or do something by which they become hungry. That's another thing. Okay. एवं नृत्यतो गायतः पश्यन् यथैवानुकरोति तान् इति रीत्या पर अभिध्यानेन प्रकृत्यध्यासेन सा च प्रकृतिः देह एवेति देह एव अहम् इति मननेन प्रकृतेः गुणैः क्रियमाणेषु कर्मसु रूपादिग्रहणेषु कर्तृत्वम् आत्मनि मन्यते 11:22:53. That's very interesting. Still, let's have a look at that. Okay, what is that? 11. What is that? 11:22:53. 11, 22, 53. नित्यतो गायतः पश्यन् यथैव अनुकरोति तान् एवं बुद्धिगुणान् पश्यन् अनेकोऽपि अनुकार्यते. Just as one may imitate persons whom one sees dancing and singing, similarly the soul, although never the doer of material activities, becomes captivated by material intelligence and is forced to imitate its qualities. Okay, let's go back to this. Iti ritya, in line with that, par abhidhyanena, by identifying with someone else. But because of identification with something else other than himself, Prakriti adhyasena, by the superimposition of Prakriti on him, sacha Prakriti, deha eva iti, deha eva aham iti, mananena, प्रकृते गुणैः क्रियमाणेषु कर्मसु रूपादिग्रहणेषु कर्तृत्वम् आत्मनि मन्यते. So then he considers himself to be the doer or the responsible agent for engaging in activities such as experiencing material sound, touch, form, taste, smell. When Prakriti's modes are active, this is because he starts thinking that this body is myself. Actually, it belongs to Prakriti, but he thinks that this body is myself. Just one minute, let me just quickly check. Prakriti Deha. Now, this body itself is factually a feature of Prakriti itself. So, whatever happens to the body, he imagines that it is he himself. Tatra nirahambhavasya par abhidhyana asambhava परावेशजात अहंकारस्य च आवरकत्वात् अस्ति एव तस्मिन् अन्यः अहंभाव विशेषः. For a person who does not have this sense of egoism, there would not be the possibility of identifying with someone else, because that ahankara that comes about by identifying with someone else, that is actually a covering. So this is another form of self-identification, which must be the correct self-identification. Such as Shuddha Swarupa Matra Nishthatvat na samsara hetuhu. It is spashtam. And it is found only in a person who has regained his or who has attained his pure nature. So that identification is not a cause for material existence. That much is clear. Viprakumarasya sa ahankarasya eva bhuta aveshatve sati bhutoham iti vaditi vivechaniya. Vadi. Iti vad. Iti vad iti. Vivechaniya. Just as a son of a Vipra who is very proud, or who has developed an identity with a ghost that has overtaken him. He says that I am this ghost. So this is like that. Fine. The forgetful living entity can be compared to a man who's under the influence of disease and has become mad, or a man haunted by ghosts who acts without control and yet thinks himself to be in control. Under the influence of material nature, the conditioned soul becomes absorbed in material consciousness. In this consciousness, whatever is done under the influence of the material energy is accepted by the conditioned soul as self-actuated. It is actually Prakriti actuated. But when Prakriti influences me, then I think that I am myself the one who is actuating this situation or the response to this situation. Actually, the soul in its pure state of existence should be in Krishna consciousness. When a person is not acting in Krishna consciousness, he is understood to be acting in material consciousness. Consciousness cannot be killed, for the symptom of the living entity is consciousness. The material consciousness simply has to be purified. One becomes liberated by accepting Krishna or the Supreme Lord as Master, and by changing the mode of consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness. 7. Yes.
So when you're talking about that susupti, so in susupti, the soul is basically self-realized at that time for the time being, as the Lord embraces the soul and he experiences pleasure. And at the same time, you said about the dissolution also, like before the creation happens, at that time also the soul has the same experience. So is it correct to like he's Krishna conscious at both the times? Is it?
He's not Krishna conscious. He simply realizes that he's not a subtle body or gross body. That experience is given to the living entities at that time only, but that is covered up. It's covered up. Then you come back to wakeful state, then you're covered up.
Oh.
When
Only
he
self-realization is there.
no, when we talk about self-realization, we are talking about coming to a state um, at which material nature no longer has the power to overcome. So we don't refer to that state as self-realization as such.
What could we say then at that stage? What we should say that?
One experiences himself.
Okay, okay.
All right, fine. 7. तदस्य संस्कृतिर्बन्धः पारतन्त्र्यं च तत्कृतं भवत्यकर्तुरीशस्य साक्षिणो निर्वृतात्मनः. Material consciousness is the cause of one's conditional life, in which conditions are enforced upon the living entity by the material energy. Although the spirit soul does not do anything and is transcendental to such activities, he is thus affected by conditional life. तदिति कर्तृत्वमननमेव अस्य जीवस्य. So the living entity simply thinks himself to be doing different things. Only that much he does. वस्तुतः साक्षिमात्रत्वात् अकर्तुरेव सतः कर्मभिः बन्धः. Actually speaking, he is only a witness to the activities that are happening using him and around him. So he is not the actual person who is doing all these things, but is bound to karmic reactions. यथा राजकीयः पुरुषः राजा उच्यते, तथा एव ईशस्य ईशशब्दवाच्यस्य ईश्वरशक्तिरूपस्य अपि कर्मबन्धकृतं भोगपारतन्त्र्यम्. Just as a man who belongs to the king is also said to be the king. Similarly, because the Jivatma is a potency of Ishvara or Isha, he is also referred to as Isha. Look at this, Ishas here, independent. So the idea is that, actually speaking, is transcendental to matter. So he is metaphorically referred to as Isha. Karmavanta kritam bhoga paratantriyam. So then he becomes dependent on matter for his experience of happiness, which is also created by his bondage to karma. So I perform some activity, then I have to receive karmic reactions for that. Nirvrita atmanaha, joyful by nature. So even though he is originally transcendental to such activities and is joyful by nature. Sukha swarupasya api samsritihi janma mrityu pravahaha. Still he has to experience samsmriti or conditioned life or conditional life. Conditional life refers to the stream of birth and death, continuous birth and death. The Mayavadi philosopher, who does not differentiate between the Supreme Spirit and the individual spirit, says that the conditional existence of the living entity is a lila or pastime. But the word pastime implies employment in the activities of the Lord. The word pastime is actually meant to be used for the Supreme Lord only. This Leelaya comes here, no? Earlier on. The Leelaya. The Mayavadis misuse the word and say that even if the living entity has become a stool-eating hog, he is also enjoying his pastime. This is the most dangerous interpretation. Actually, the Supreme Lord is the leader and maintainer of all living entities. His pastimes are transcendental to any material activity. Such pastimes of the Lord cannot be dragged to the level of the conditional activities of the living entities. In conditional life, the living entity actually remains as if a captive in the hands of material energy. Whatever the material energy dictates, the conditioned soul does. He has no responsibility. He is simply the witness of the action. But he is forced to act in that way due to his offense in his eternal relationship with Krishna. Lord Krishna therefore says in Bhagavad Gita that Maya, this material energy, is so forceful that it is insurmountable. But if a living entity simply understands his constitutional position is to serve Krishna, and he tries to act on this principle, then however conditioned he may be, the influence of Maya immediately vanishes. This is clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter. Krishna takes charge of anyone who surrenders to him in helplessness, and thus the influence of Maya on conditional life is removed. The spirit soul is actually Sachidananda, eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge. Under the clutches of Maya, however, he suffers from continued birth, death, disease, and old age. One has to be serious to cure this condition of material existence and thus transfer himself to Krishna consciousness, for thus This long suffering may be mitigated without difficulty. In summary, the suffering of the conditioned soul is due to his attachment to material nature. This attachment should be transferred from matter to Krishna. 8. Karya-karana-kartatve karanam prakritim viduhu bhoktatve sukha-dukkhanam purusham prakrite param. The cause of the conditioned soul's material body and the senses presiding deities and demigods is the material nature. This is understood by learned men. The feelings of happiness and distress of the soul, who is transcendental by nature, are caused by the spirit soul himself. This is directly parallel to what we have in Bhagavad Gita also. The verse similar to this. Jivasya karmabhihi eva bandhaha tesham karmanam cha sadhane phalabhoge cha pramena prakriti purusha eva karane ityaha karye iti. The Jivatma attains bondage. Karma bandhaha. Okay. The Jivatma attains bondage simply through his karmic reactions. And there are two causes for those karmic reactions. At the time of sadhana and at the time of sadhya. That means when you are engaging in these activities and the one who gives these activities, and at the time of experiencing these activities, they are respectively Prakriti and Purusha. Ramena Prakriti Purusha Vaiva Karane. That is explained here. इति कार्येति भूतेन्द्र देवतादिभिरेव कर्मसिद्धेः तेषां भूतेन्द्र देवतानां च कार्यकारणकर्तृत्वे प्रकृतिमेव कारणं विदुः. For an activity to be executed, you require the gross elements, you require the senses, you require the presiding deities of the senses, and so on. So now Prakriti is the cause for all of that. Prakriti tesham tad bhavasya srishtatva. It is due to Prakriti that this arrangement itself exists. He is the one who creates this arrangement. Jivasya karma karanam maya adhinam ityartha. And the jivas causing the karmic reaction is under the control of maya. This is the point. Karma phala data cha parameshwara eva. And the one who gives the result of these activities, the one who bestows karmic reactions, is the Supreme Lord only. Iti jivasya karma phala bhoktritvam ishvara adhinam eva. So the living entity's experience of the reactions to his karma is under the control of Ishvara, the Supreme Lord only. Ityaha bhoktatvam jivasya karma phalanam bhoge purusham karanam viduhu ityamaya. So when it comes to the living and the jivas experience of the results of his activities, and Purusha is the cause. Ishvara is the cause. It's a very fine explanation. So I engage in an activity, material activity. Material activity can be defined very simply as the endeavor to experience material sound, touch, form, taste, smell. So now, for those activities to take place, then you require gross elements, you require senses, including the subtle body senses. You require presiding deities who ensure that specific laws of material nature pertaining to specific gross elements and senses are all properly executed, and so on. All of that arrangement is created by Prakriti. So I engage in that activity. And then if it is in line with Vedic Dharma, then I'll get a positive result. If I don't, then I'll get a negative result. And these positive results and negative results are given by the Supreme Lord. So while I'm executing those material activities, I'm under the control of Maya, Mahamaya. And now these karmic reactions, I'll have to experience it later in this life and later on. So that experience of material happiness and material unhappiness is caused by the arrangement of the Supreme Lord, because he is the one who gives those results as a super soul. Question.
Prabhu, it became little clear, but I want to have some more clarity when you mentioned that we are prakriti actuated. So that means that whatever little free will a Jivatma had in spiritual world, that also is lost in when I am in material world.
No, no, no. The free will is part and parcel of the living entity, which always exists even now. Prakriti mein, she has put us inside an environment of temptations. So now, how we respond to specific temptations is the free is uh, has to be decided by the living entity by taking into account his free will, whether he wants to respond to it in a tamasic manner, in a rajasic manner, in a sattvic manner, or even in a transcendental manner. That much free will is there. It becomes more and more difficult the more and more I am in tamoguna. It becomes more and more easy the more I am in the transcendental prakrita status. Okay.
But sometimes I feel that even my response is controlled. I don't want to act in certain way, like
See,
I
that is
don't
why
want to become.
this example is always given. If you have this oxen which are uh, tied to a
Rope.
rope, and it is suppose there's a wooden peg which is fixed on the ground, and one end of that and that peg is tied up with a rope, and the other end of the rope is tied to the nose of a bullock, and then this bullock goes around. Now it has a large space, large range, but as it goes around more and more and more and more and more, then uh, because the rope is now continuously being tied around that wooden peg, then the range of the scope of the bullock going around, that will also reduce. So it goes around more, then that scope will become so. Then it will come closer and closer and closer to that wooden peg. So similarly, the more and more we engage in activities of unrestricted material enjoyment, the more and more we lose our freedom also. Therefore, you see that the demigods, they have more freedom. And look at human beings, we have some freedom. And look at the animals and insects and worms, they have even less freedom. So as you go down, you become more and more under control. And you go up, then you have less control. Control is always there. Conditioned soul means control only. Arrested. We are all arrested living entities. But more freedom, less freedom.
Yes, bro. Thank you, bro.
Okay. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that when the Lord descends to this material world, he comes as a person by his own energy, Atma Maya. He's not forced by any superior energy. He comes by his own will. And this can be called as pastime or Leela. But here it is clearly stated that the conditioned soul is forced to take a certain type of body. Paratantriyam Shitasritam. He becomes dependent. He comes under the control of either Prakriti or Purusha, one of the two. But here it is clearly stated that the conditioned soul is forced to take a certain type of body and senses under the three modes of material nature. That body is not received according to his own choice. See, this acceptance of a body, this is all part of karmic reaction. In other words, the conditioned soul has no free choice. He has to accept a certain type of body according to his karma. But when there are bodily reactions as felt in happiness and distress, it is to be understood that the cause is the spirit soul himself, originally. If he so desires, the spirit soul can change his conditional life of dualities by choosing to serve Krishna. The living entity is the cause of his own suffering, but it can also be the cause of his eternal happiness. This is Prabhupada here is interpreting Purusha as a spirit soul itself, not as a supreme Purusha, as the Jivatma. This interpretation is also fine because ultimately, as long as the Jivatma wants to enjoy material world, only then all of this comes. Karanam gunasangosya sadasya yoni janmasu. As long as the Jivatma has an addiction towards the features of this world, then he has to take birth in good or bad species of life. So the Jivatma should also be understood to be a cause here. The living entity is the cause of his own suffering, but it can also be the cause of his eternal happiness. When he wants to engage in Krishna consciousness, a suitable body is offered to him by the internal potency, the spiritual energy of the Lord, and when he wants to satisfy his senses, a material body is offered. Thus, it is his free choice to accept a spiritual body or a material body, but once the body is accepted, he has to enjoy or suffer the consequences, which is under the control of the Supreme Purusha. The Mayavadi philosopher's presentation is that the living entity enjoys his pastimes by accepting the body of a hog. This theory is not acceptable, however, because the word pastime implies voluntary acceptance for enjoyment. Therefore, this interpretation is most misleading. When there is enforced acceptance for suffering, it is not a pastime. The Lord's pastimes and the conditional living entity's acceptance of karmic reaction are not on the same level. 9. Devahutirvacha प्रकृतिः पुरुषस्यापि लक्षणं पुरुषोत्तम ब्रूहि कारणयोरस्य सदसच्च यदात्मकम्. 1 minute. प्रकृतेः पुरुषस्यापि लक्षणं पुरुषोत्तमं ब्रूहि कारणयोरस्य सदसच्च यदात्मकम्. Dehuti said, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies, for both of these are the causes of this manifest and unmanifest creation. ततः च तावेव प्रकृतिपुरुषौ विशेषतः जिज्ञासमाना aha prakritiriti. And then she became inquisitive about knowing specifically about the details pertaining to Prakriti and Purusha. And she asked this question. Prakritehi iti asya vishwasya. What is this? Sada? Sada? Is that correctly typed? Asya vishwasya sad asaccha. Sad. Sat. Sad asaccha. Sthulam sukshmam cha karyam yadatmakam. Here, manifest and unmanifest. Cause of this manifest and unmanifest creation refer to creation of gross and subtle matter. Prakriti or material nature is connected with both the Supreme Lord and the living entities, just as a mother is connected with her husband as a wife and with her children as a mother. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he impregnates Mother Nature with children, living entities, and thereafter all species of living entities become manifest. The relationship of all living entities with material nature has been explained. Now, an understanding of the relationship between material nature and the Supreme Lord is sought by Devahuti. The product of that relationship is stated to be the manifest and unmanifest material world. The unmanifest material world is the subtle Mahatattva, and from that Mahatattva, the material manifestation has emerged. So, subtle refers to Mahatattva, which is subtle. And gross is this manifestation experienced by the conditioned souls. In the Vedic literatures, it is said that by the glance of the Supreme Lord, the total material energy is impregnated and then everything is born of material nature. It is also confirmed in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that under his glance, Adhyakshena, under his direction and by his will, nature is working. It is not that nature works blindly. After understanding the position of the conditioned souls in relation to material nature, Devahuti wanted to know how nature works under the direction of the Lord. and what the relationship is between the material nature and the Lord. In other words, she wanted to learn the characteristic of the Supreme Lord in relation to the material nature. The relationship of the living entities with matter and that of the Supreme Lord with matter are certainly not on the same level, although the Mayavadis may interpret it in that way. When it is said that the living entities are bewildered, the Mayavadi philosophers ascribe this bewilderment to the Supreme Lord. But that is not applicable. The Lord is never bewildered. That is the difference between personalists and impersonalists. Devahuti is not unintelligent. He has enough intelligence to understand that the living entities are not on the level of the Supreme Lord, because the living entities are infinitesimal. They become bewildered or conditioned by material nature. But this does not mean that the Supreme Lord is also conditioned or bewildered. The difference between the conditioned soul and the Lord is that the Lord is the Lord, the master of material nature, and is therefore not subject to its control. He is controlled neither by spiritual nature nor by material nature. He is a supreme controller himself, and he cannot be compared to the ordinary living entities or controlled by the laws of material nature. Two words used in this verse are Sat and Asat. The cosmic manifestation is Asat, it does not exist. But the material energy of the Supreme Lord is Sat, or ever existing. Here, it does not exist means it does not exist in its, it does not exist without a change. And when Prabhupada writes the material energy is ever existing, it means it exists eternally without a change. Material nature is ever existing in its subtle form as the energy of the Lord, but it sometimes manifests this non-existent or temporarily existent nature, the cosmos. An analogy may be made with the father and mother. The mother and the father exist, but sometimes the mother begets children. Similarly, this cosmic manifestation, which comes from the unmanifest material nature of the Supreme Lord, sometimes appears and again disappears. But the material nature is ever existing, and the Lord is the supreme cause for both the subtle and gross manifestations of this material world. Text 10. Sri Bhagavan Vacha. Yattat trigunam avyaktam nityam saddasadaatmakam pradhanam prakritim rahur avishesham visheshavat. The Supreme Personality of God has said, the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifest stage and is called Pradhana. It is called Prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. Tatra Prakritim Lakshayati. Then he defines Prakriti. Yat khalu trigunam sattva traya samaharaha taddeva avyaktam pradhanam prakritim cha prahuhu. That which is described as the collection of Sattva-guna, Rajoguna, and Tamoguna. That is referred to as the Avyakta, the unmanifest, Pradhana. It's referred to as Avyakta, Pradhana, and Prakriti. Tatra Avyakta Sangyatve Hetuhu. The reasons for referring to it as Avyakta are set out. Avishesham, Gunatraya Samyarupatvad, Anabhivyakta Vishesham. It is called Avyakta because no variety is revealed, because the three modes of material nature are present to an equal extent. Each of them is present to an equal extent. Pradhana Sangyatve Hetuhu, and the reason for referring to it as Pradhana is Visheshavat. Swamsha Karya Rupana Mahadadi Visheshanam Ashraya Rupatvena Tevya Shreshtham. Because it is the shelter of various particular forms such as Mahatattva, Ahankara, and so on, which are actually parts of this material nature and also effects of this material nature. It is the source. Therefore, it is far better than its effects. Prakriti Sangyatve Hetuhu. So therefore, it's referred to as Pradhana. Pradhana literally means the best. So amongst all the different stages of the unpacking of material nature, The original one is the best. Therefore, it is referred to as pradhana. That means material nature when satoguna, rajoguna, and tamoguna are in equal measure. Prakriti sangyatve hetuhu. The reason for calling it prakriti, sad asad atmakam, it consists of cause and effect. It consists of sat and asat. Sat, asat, su. Karyakarana rupeshu mahad adishu karanatvat anugataha atma swarupam yasya tat. Because amongst the different forms of the respective causes and effects, there's a whole chain of causes and effects, beginning with Mahatattva. And because it is the original cause, it is referred to as Prakriti. Prakriti itself means nature. So since its very nature is to be the cause of all of this, it's referred to as Prakriti. Pralayepi karana matra atmana avasthitatva nityam. Even at the time of dissolution, it exists by itself as the cause. So it's eternal. Yadva, alternative interpretation. Yat tad anirvachaniyam shreshthatvat pradhanam tat prakritim prahuhu. That which is beyond description because it is the best, that pradhana, that is referred to as prakriti. Anirvachaniyatvam evaha. And how it is beyond description is stated here. Trigunamapi avyaktam sagunam khalu vyakti bhavantyeva. The three modes of material nature are not manifest. When it is saguna, when it is filled with the modes of material nature, then certainly it becomes manifest. Yatha satkaryam asatkaranam. Just as tattva atmakam api nityam. Sat refers to the effect. Asat refers to the cause. And despite that, they are eternal. तथा भूतं मृद्दादि खलु अनित्यमेव दृष्टं तथैव महदादि विशेषवत् द्रव्यं खलु तद् अन्यद् रूपम् अविशेषं न दृष्टम् इति. Just a clay and so on. It is both the cause and effect. And it is seen to be temporary. So is it with the various particularities of Mahatattva and so on. We do not perceive any form of material nature which is without distinction. The first explanation is easier to follow. The Lord points out material nature in its subtle stage, which is called pradhana, and he analyzes this pradhana. The explanation of pradhana and prakriti is that pradhana is a subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements. Although they are undifferentiated, although the material elements are undifferentiated, one can understand that the total material elements are contained there. When the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, the manifestation is called prakriti. Because let's say that Brahman is without variegatedness and without differentiation. One may say that Pradhana is the Brahman stage. But actually the Brahman stage is not Pradhana. Pradhana is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman there is no existence of the material modes of nature. One may argue that the Mahatattva is also different from Pradhana because in the Mahatattva there are manifestations. The actual explanation of Pradhana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, avyakta. Avyaktam. Unmanifested. The reaction of the total elements does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called Pradhana. Pradhana is not the time element because in the time element there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is it the jiva or marginal potency of the living entities, or designated conditioned living entities. Because the designations of the living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya. Where is it? Nityam. eternal, which indicates eternality. So pradhana is eternal. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhana. 11. Panchabhir Brahma, Chaturvir Dashabhis Tatha, Echet Chaturvimshatikam, Ganam Pradhanikam Vidhu. The aggregate elements, namely the 5 gross elements, the 5 subtle elements, the 4 internal senses, the 5 senses for gathering knowledge, and the 5 outward organs of action are known as the pradhana. Yes.
Prabhu, in the previous purport, that expression, nor is it the jiva or material potency of living entities. Oh, sorry, marginal potency of living entities. What does it mean, Prabhu? Marginal potency of living entities?
No, the living entities which is the marginal potency. That's what it means.
Okay. Okay, bro.
Annesham tattvanam lakshanam uktum thani ganayati. Now to define the other elements, Lord Kapila enumerates them. Panchabhir ityadi. From the text beginning with the current text. Panchabhihi, tatha panchabhihi, chaturvihi, dashabhihi cha, yo ganaha tam pradhanikam pradhanad bhutam or udbhutam. Pradhanad udbhutam. So this aggregate of all of these, 5 gross elements, 5 subtle elements, 4 internal senses, 5 senses for gathering knowledge, 5 outward organs of action, all of that have come about from pradhana. Udbhutam ganam brahma, brahmatvena upasyam viduhu jnaninaha, and it is said to be Brahman. In other words, it is worshipped as Brahman by the Jnanis. Ganam Kidrisham, what is the nature of this aggregate? Etani Mahabhuta Adini Chatur Vimshatir Yatraktam. It is an aggregate which consists of 24 elements, beginning with the 5 gross elements, the Mahabhutas. According to Bhagavad Gita, the sum total of the 24 elements described here is called Yonir Mahad Brahma. Prabhupada interprets this word Brahma as Mamayonir Mahad Brahma. Material nature is Brahman. This is all Madhvacharya's favorite. He describes material existence itself as Brahman. The presiding deity of this, according to him, is Lakshmi. The sum total of the living entities is impregnated into this Yonir Mahad Brahma, and they are born in different forms, beginning from Brahma down to the insignificant ant. In the Srimad Bhagavatam and other Vedic literatures, the sum total of the 24 elements, Pradhana, is also described as Yonir Mahad Brahma. It is a source of the birth and subsistence of all living entities. 12. Mahabhutani Panchaiva, Dhurapognir Marun Nabhaha, Tanmatrani Chatavanti Gandhadini Matani. There are 5 gross elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. There are also 5 subtle elements, smell, taste, color, touch, and sound. Tani Vivranoti Tripihi. Then he elaborates on what was stated in text 11 in 3 verses. Tavanti Panchaiva. Okay. That's all incorporated in the translation. 13. Indriyani dashashvotram tvagdhrit rasanna nasikaha. Vakarau charanau medram payu dashama uchyate. The senses for acquiring knowledge and the organs for action. Number 10, namely the auditory sense, the sense of taste, the tactile sense, the sense of sight, the sense of smell, and the active organs for speaking, working, traveling, generating, and evacuating. 14. मनोबुद्धिरहंकारश्चित्तम् इत्यन्तरात्मकम् चतुर्धा लक्ष्यते भेदो वृत्त्या लक्षणरूपया. The internal subtle senses are experienced as having four aspects in the shape of mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness. Distinctions between them can be made only by different functions, since they represent different characteristics. Antaratmakam, antahkaranam. Antaratmakam refers to the internal subtle senses. These are the internal subtle senses. Lakshana rupaya, vyavachedikaya vrittya. They refer to different characteristics because they have certain unique features. They have their distinct natures. The four internal senses or subtle senses described herein are defined by different characteristics. When pure consciousness is polluted by material contamination and when identification with the body becomes prominent, what is said to be situated under false ego. Consciousness is a function of the soul, and therefore, behind consciousness there is soul. Consciousness polluted by material contamination is called ahankara. Here, this is a very interesting statement by Madhvacharya. Quote from Skanda Purana. Buddhir adhyavasanaya samshayam kurute manaha. Intelligence brings about decisions, resolute decisions. Samshayam kurute manaha. And manas brings about doubts. Abhimanaha hi ahankaraha. Ahankara brings about identification. Chittam smarana karana. And chitta is a cause for remembrance. So these are different aspects of the subtle body. Question.
Prabhuji, Prabhupada is writing in 14th verse, last line, that consciousness polluted by material contamination is called ahankar. So if polluted consciousness is also ahankar, and if ego is also ahankar, I'm confused here.
You're confused by what? There are four substances. No. Here, Prabhupada is not differentiating between them. That's he doesn't do it here. I think he'll do it in some other place. Because all this chitta, all of these things will, if I remember correctly, it comes, they will all be defined.
But it looks, Prabhu, that contaminated
This
consciousness
whole
and ego.
description is a description of false ego only. He's only describing false ego here. He's only
So
describing false ego here.
when internal senses are counted as four, so mind and intelligence are first two. Next two are ego and contaminated
Yes,
consciousness.
but Prabhupada is talking about ahankara here.
In translation, Prabhupada writes, mind remains
What is your problem?
and contaminated consciousness.
In in translation, four senses are named as.
Of course, but here he is talking about this. This portion which I have highlighted is only about ahankara.
And his
Means about ego.
What?
Prabhupada is
Uh,
equating
Ahankar means it's about ego only.
Ahankara is ahankara, false ego.
And then contaminated consciousness will be dealt with separately.
Yeah, those things will come later.
Okay, bro.
15. एतावानेव संख्यातो ब्रह्मणः सगुणस्य सन्निवेशो मया प्रोक्तो यः कालः पंचविंशकः. All these are considered the qualified Brahman. So this is how they get this concept of Saguna Brahman. But actually Saguna Brahman is Prakriti. The mixing element which is known as time is counted as the 25th element. Sattvagunasya Mahadadi Prapanchasya. Where is Sattvagunasya? Why is it Sattvagunasya?
Sattvagunasya.
What is this verse? 15. Verse 15. Etavan. Etavan. Sagunasya. Your question. Sagunasya. Mahadadi prapanchasya. We are Sagunasya with material qualities, or the qualified indicates that it is the entire totality of material existence, including Mahatattva, from Mahatattva down. Kale tu matadvayamaha. Regarding time, there are two opinions which are stated here. Yah kala sa panchavimshakaha prakritehe avastha visheshaha ityarthaha. That time is considered to be the 25th element. So one opinion is it is a specific state of material nature. According to the Vedic version, there is no existence beyond Brahman. Sarvam khal vidam brahma, Chandogya 3.14.1. It is stated also in the Vishnu Purana that whatever we see is parasya brahmana shaktihi. Everything is an expansion of the energy of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Brahman. When Brahman is mixed with the three qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance, there results the material expansion, which is sometimes called Saguna Brahman, and which consists of the 25 elements. In the Nirguna Brahman, there is no material contamination, or in the spiritual world, the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are not present. Where Nirguna Brahman is found, simple unalloyed goodness prevails. Saguna Brahman is described by the Sankhya system of philosophy as consisting of 25 elements, including the time factor, past, present, and future. 16. Prabhavam Paurusham Prahu Kalameke Yato Bhayam Ahankar Vimudhasya Kartu Prakritim Yushaha. The influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is felt in the time factor, which causes fear of death due to the false ego of the deluded soul who has contacted material nature. Eketu, but some say Paurusham, Purushasya, Ishwarasya, Prabhavam, Vikramam, Kalamahu. Some say that the time factor is the influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, of the Purusha, which means of the Ishvara, Parameshwara. Kartuhu jivasya yataha bhayam iti jiva svabhagatvena kalaha lakshitaha. And it is because of the time factor that the Jivatma is frightened. In other words, time is here defined as the one who agitates the Jivatma with fear. The living entity's fear of death is due to his false ego of identifying with the body. Everyone is afraid of death. Actually, there is no death for the spirit soul, but due to our absorption in the identification of body as self, the fear of death develops. It is also stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam 11.2.37, Bhayam Dvitiya Abhiniveshatah Syat. Dvitiya refers to matter, which is beyond spirit. Matter is a secondary manifestation of spirit, for matter is produced from spirit. Just as the material elements described are caused by the Supreme Lord or the Supreme Spirit, the body is also a product of the Spirit Soul. Therefore, the material body is called Dvitiya, or the second. One is absorbed in this second element or second exhibition of the Spirit. Secondary exhibition of the Spirit is afraid of death. When one is fully convinced that he is not his body, there is no question of fearing death, since the Spirit Soul does not die. If the Spirit Soul engages in the spiritual activities of devotion service, he is completely freed from the platform of birth and death. His next position is complete spiritual freedom from the material body. The fear of death is the action of the Kala, or the time factor, which represents the influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, time is destructive. Whatever is created is subject to destruction and dissolution, which is the action of time. Time is the representation of the Lord, and reminds us also that we must surrender unto the Lord. The Lord speaks to every conditioned soul as time. He says in Bhagavad Gita, see, when you say the Lord speaks to every conditioned soul as time, through time he speaks to the conditioned souls. Or if I have to use the language of the Ramanujiyas, then as the super soul of time, as the inner controller of time, he communicates to the conditioned soul that he is going to destroy everything. He says in Bhagavad Gita that if someone surrenders unto him, then there is no longer any problem of birth and death. We should therefore accept the time factor as the Supreme Personality of God is standing before us. This is further explained in the following verse. Yes.
So when it is said that matter is produced from spirit or matter is secondary manifestation of spirit, I'm unable to understand this point that how can spirit produce matter, although
Just,
it's
just as Prabhupada also gives this example, it's originally coming from Bhagavatam itself. Just as a shadow, the shadow is a creation of the sun. Sun is illumination. So a shadow is created by illumination. How can shadow, which is the very opposite of illumination, because where there is illumination, there cannot be shadow. Like that.
Mhm.
Okay.
So,
17. Yeah.
Prabhu, but this example, like, although it gives a hint, but will I be able to understand it better in future? This concept or this question that how can
When we
spirit
study
produce matter?
Bhagavatam further, we'll have a better understanding.
Mm-hmm. Okay, bro.
17. Prakritir guna samyasya nirvisheshasya manavi sheshtayatah sab bhagavan kala ityupalakshitah. My dear mother or daughter of Swayambhava Manu, as the time factor, as I have explained, the time factor, as I have explained, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead from whom the creation begins as a result of the agitation of the neutral, unmanifested nature. Prakriti kshophakatvena api tam lakshayati. He then defines time as that which agitates Prakriti also. Prakriti. So time has been defined in broadly two ways. First way as a state of material nature, and secondly uh, as an agitator. Agitator, two different types of agitator. Agitator of the jivatmas by producing fear in them, conditioned jivatmas. Agitator of Prakriti herself. The unmanifested state of material nature, pradhana, is being explained. The Lord says that when the unmanifested, what is this? This. The Lord says that when the unmanifested material nature is agitated by the glance of the Supreme Personality of God, it begins to manifest itself in different ways. Before this agitation, it remains in the neutral state without interaction by the three modes of material nature. In other words, material nature cannot produce any variety of manifestations without the contact of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is very nicely explained in Bhagavad Gita. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of the products of material nature. Without his contact, material nature cannot produce anything. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita also, a very suitable example is given in this connection. Although the nipples on a goat's neck appear to be breast nipples, they do not give milk. Similarly, material nature appears to the material scientist to act and react in a wonderful manner, but in reality, it cannot act without the agitated time, who is a representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When time agitates the neutral state of material nature begins to produce varieties of manifestations. Ultimately, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of creation. As a woman cannot produce children unless impregnated by a man, material nature cannot produce or manifest anything unless it is impregnated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of the time factor. 18. Antah Purusha Rupena, Kala Rupena, Yo Bahi, Samanvetyesha Sattvana Bhagavan Atmamaya. by exhibiting his potencies, the Supreme Personality of Godhead adjusts all these different elements, keeping himself within as super soul and without as time. Internally in the form of the Purusha, externally in the form of Kala. He exists, keeping everything in harmony. Everything amongst all the living entities, all the entities. By his own internal potency, he brings about all this. Ateva Antah Purusharupena, Antaryami Rupena, Niyanta, Samanvaiti, Samyak, Tat Vikara Rahitaha Eva, Manusyutaha Vartate. Very fine example. Fine explanation also. Therefore, internally, he is present in the form of the Purusha. That means he is present in the form of the Antaryami, the inner controller. So, in the form of the inner controller, he is the controller. And he completely exists, interwoven into Prakriti without being affected in any manner by Prakriti. Nasyutaha vartate. Bahicha kala rupena niyanta. And externally in the form of the time feature also he is the controller. Sattvanam, Sarvapranam. He is the controller of all the living creatures. So internally in the form of the Antaryami, he is the regulator, sustainer. Externally, he is the controller of all the living creatures. Tadevam pradhanikaha ganaha chaturvimshati sankhyaha. So in this way, the aggregate of 24 elements constitutes the pradhana. So we get this products, 24 products of pradhana. Kalaha jiva cha iti dvau. Then you have Kala Shakti and Jiva Shakti, two separate categories. Prakriti Purusha dvau. Then there is Prakriti and Purusha. There are also two. Militva Ashtavimshatihi Tattvani Bhavanti. So in this way, there are 28 elements in total. How is it 28? 24 plus 2, 26 plus 2, 28. Jiva and Purusha are completely distinct here. Okay, we'll read this purport in the next session. We'll stop with this. Okay. Question.
So, it is little off track that initially that one question which you replied that either feed the neglect the non-hungry or make them hungry, do something to make them hungry. Can you put some light on that? What is that doing something to make them hungry?
Well, just do lots of kirtans, give lots of prasadam. The more one engages in sinful activities, the more they'll become frustrated. No doubt about it. So they'll get frustrated. Not the ideal crowd, but there is some possibility if they, strictly speaking, anyone, Sattva-guna, Raja-guna, Tamo-guna, whichever they're influenced by, if they are orally receptive, then it will work. If we, from our side, present everything with purity, and we also obey the scriptures that we are preaching, that is also important. It will come. We have to progress. And when we preach, then Krishna will also send the right type of souls. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Kaya kalpataru vaishnavi, Vaishnavibhyo namo namaha.